Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days. Give a portion to 7 or even to 8, for you know not what disaster may happen on earth. If the clouds are full of rain, they empty themselves on the earth. And if a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where it falls, there it will lie. He who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. That's from Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verses 1 through 4. We'll discuss that a little later on, I hope. And ladies, I'm glad to see you here today. I'm honored that you came. I know I have a lot of backlight in here, but this is the only quiet place in the house today. And I did want to share this guest room with you. I've changed it a little bit and made it more light. And I have got a few things that I'd like to talk to you about today. The Homemaker's radio is designed for you to listen to as you go, but I do show you some things once in a while, and today I'm going to share my teacup. I always try to match them with what I'm wearing. This is from Home Goods, Grace's Teaware, and you've seen it before. And I've got less teacups than I have videos, so it's all being recycled now. So ladies, today I have quite a few things that I have taken note of to talk about, and my notes are never how I really want them, but I figured that it's better to have something than to have nothing. And we always start out with, if you're a homemaker and you just need a little bit of encouragement, you haven't quite got started. I was just looking at somebody's video, and of course I didn't pay any attention to who it was, but briefly, some man had a video about how to recover, how to get started after a slump, and had been laid off work and had a few days where he just kind of laid around, didn't accomplish anything, and he had divided it into day 1, day 2, day 3, on how he gradually got out of the slump and became more productive and eventually created work for himself. And so one of the ways that you can get out of a slump, and especially at home, it's easy to laze around, isn't it? Is your appearance and I call it prep because it involves your hair and your clothing and everything else, your mental state, and it helps you to get out of a slump. So one of the things that we were often told to do after we had been sick was we would start to recover a little bit, still be kind of languishing there, and someone would say, I think you would feel better if you went and took a shower and got dressed. And then after that, of course, you didn't really feel like going back to bed. So appearance is so important for getting yourself out of a slump. And I'm only talking to those who might need this. That doesn't necessarily mean all of you will be affected that way. The next thing that I like to go into is the house. And I'm reminded of the book by Jane Austen called Emma, in which Mrs. Elton, now, no matter what you might think of Mrs. Elton, she was difficult to like, wasn't she? But she said a few things that were very interesting. And lately, with so many of you not being able to go anywhere and having to confine yourselves more to your own property and to the home, I think this is wonderful because it just gave me so many ideas. And I'm sure you all know this and have found it out for yourself, but here's what she said. There is nothing like staying home for real comfort. Nobody can be more devoted to the home than I am. I was blessed with so many resources within myself. The world was not necessary for me. I always remembered she said that. And it's too bad they put it to that it was a quote from a character that was portrayed in the movies as being rather difficult. But she did say a lot of things that were actually true. So I'll read it to you again. There is nothing like staying home for real comfort. Nobody can be more devoted to the home than I am. I was blessed with so many resources within myself. The world was not necessary for me. And the resources within, that's what I wanted to talk about today. Those of you who are home now more than normal will find that there is so much to do at home and so much you can do. And once you start being more organized and creative, you'll find you just make more work for yourself, because I'll be walking along thinking, I'm wondering if there's anything to do today, and I'll notice something that needs to be sorted through, cleaned up, even a drawer needs to be looked at a little bit more. Sometimes with drawers, like the little drawer that you put all your pencils and things in, that can sit there for years, and we don't realize that's part of housework. We have to clean that up. And I'll notice some things. Also, she said, I have so many resources within myself. The world was not necessary for me. We are learning to get along without having to go on a trip or go out to eat, because now, particularly myself, I'm taking instructional videos every day, and once a week I'll do cooking. And so this last week I took the video with me to the kitchen, and I did everything it said and created a meal with ordinary food. We kind of use the same foods all the time, but to put them in a different way or to put different seasoning in them just makes it more interesting. So the resources within you are your hands and your mind and perhaps your voice, and of course your movements in the home and your ability to do things a little differently, to take care of things a little better. Our homes, by the time all this is over, we should have very clean, very well repaired homes. One of my ambitions was to paint the inside of the house and the outside of the house, but I wasn't able to do that yet. I wanted to do a few more things first, and it still may come to pass. And so, there's just more time to do that. And since I have been, I was reading someone's comment recently on one of my posts, and she said that she started ordering everything for her home, and sometimes you can order, it'll come to your door. Other times you have to go and pick it up in a special parking area. And I had decided I would do that. What a great idea, because she had made the comment that it had reduced so much stress. She hadn't realized that it had been so stressful. And I am having I keep a little diary, and I started day 1, and now I'm on day 12 of not going anywhere, and I haven't gotten the least bit antsy or restless to go anywhere. But I have ordered a lot of things, and I have gone had someone else go and get something that needed to be picked up, and what a blessing that is. You just feel so rich because now everything's coming to you. And so that is, the home is going to improve because there's more time. And even if I just went to the nearest grocery store or the nearest Dollar Tree or post office or bank, those few stops sometimes would take me 3 or 4 hours before I got home because of all the other things that are entailed in it. And also, the fact that you have to wait in certain places. And so the home should be better taken. We should have better results for all this, that all of our homes will be better repaired, better looked after, cleaner, better arranged. And so every week I also have a home improvement tutorial that I watch. Try to find something on YouTube that's free and shows something about how to improve life at home. And one of the things that I learned recently was the traffic areas. When you go and sit down somewhere in your front room, your living room, your lounge, you like to get in there and sit down without having to bypass a bunch of things or a coffee table or something like that. And also watch where people are walking. Are they going to walk in front of, this one video was talking about, are they going to be walking in front past you to get to where they sit? And I arranged my living room so that everyone can go and sit somewhere without walking in front of someone else, and which I found very nice. And so these resources within, we have more than we realize. So now I hope that you're working today, you're folding a few things and doing a few things and not watching. There isn't anything else to see. I am going to read quite a bit to you, I think. So I want to go on to the house and the housework because I have noticed so many more things. Sometimes you get used to living in a home and you just kind of walk past something and it's an eyesore. You don't really notice it. And so I'm looking at everything a little more carefully. How could that corner be better? How could that wall be better? Does something need to be cleaned? We often don't notice things that need to be cleaned. We've walked past it so many times. And so I was watching a few videos of people who clean, and some of them are called Clean With Me. And one thing that really impressed me is, especially these young women, they take everything off, take everything down, clean it all. When they're cleaning out a drawer, they take everything out. They clean the containers things go in. If they're cleaning something on a wall, they'll take down the shelves, they'll wipe them clean, they'll take down the pictures, they'll wipe around the pictures, they'll clean the wall. And I just think that is so interesting. We don't pay very much attention to that because when everything was, the commercial world was open all the time, there was always somewhere that we needed to go, and we kind of gave everything a lick and a promise, I think. But I have something to read to you about children and about school and all that. So I'm going to go and read to you a poem. I'm having a lot of trouble with my phone now because it's not keeping the things that I tell it to bring up. Okay, this is called I Had a Mother Who Read to Me. Now, don't get all upset if you didn't have a mother who read to you. But naturally, even if you did read a little to your children, a poem like this is going to make you see the value and wish that you had done more. And even when we teach them how to read, they still like to come. If you start reading something aloud, all the children start coming around. So I want to read this to you, and it's by someone named Strickland Gilliland. And I want to read about him first. He was like that other poet that I liked so much. Goodness, can't think of his name. He wrote the poems about how you can, somebody said it couldn't be done. And this is a different man, and he lived from 1869 to 1954. He was an American humorist, lecturer, and poet. Born in Ohio, Strickland started out as a journalist and worked for several different newspapers, including the Washington Post. While on a staff at the Richmond Daily Palladium, he wrote a humorous poem about an Irish railroader that ended up in Life magazine and led to swift national acclaim. Credited with writing the world's shortest poem, my mother had this, she read it to us sometimes. It was in a poetry book that she had, a family poetry book. And he wrote the shortest poem called, and here's the title. The title is really long. It's like 3 times as long as the poem. Lines on the Antiquity of Microbes. Now, can you guess what this is? Because I know you've all heard it, especially if you're from the olden days. Subtitled Fleas. And here's the poem, Adam had 'em. I remember we children, when my mother read that to us, thought it was the funniest thing because he made the shortest poem in the world. As well as one of the world's most anthologized poems, this one, Strickland produced a huge body of work during his lifetime. He traveled the country for years, entertaining enthralled audiences with his witty novels, satirical essays, rollicking songs, and heartwarming poetry. I'm going to read this to you. I had a mother, called The Reading Mother. I had a mother who read to me. Now, there are other versions of this poem, but this is the one that I was most familiar with. I had a mother who read to me sagas of pirates who scoured the sea. Cutlasses clenched in their yellow teeth, blackbirds stowed in the hold beneath. Now you know what blackbirds were. They're not real like birds in the air type. I had a mother who read me lays of ancient and gallant and golden days, stories of Marmion and Ivanhoe, which every boy has the right to know. I had a mother who read me tales of Gelert, the hound of the hills of Wales, true to his trust till his tragic death, faithfulness blent with his final breath. I had a mother who read me things that wholesome life to the boy heart brings. Stories that stir with an upward touch. Oh, that each mother of boys were such. You may have tangible wealth untold, caskets of jewels and coffers of gold. Richer than I you can never be. I had a mother who read to me. So I want to reread a line here that I misread. Poetry is very sensitive. When there is no comma or any kind of punctuation mark, you just keep reading like it was a whole line. You don't pay too much attention to where it is, and you don't stop. So here's what. I had a mother who read me the things that wholesome life to the boy heart brings. So this is such a beautiful story, and I always remembered getting, but I remember too being so tired and lacking in sleep most of the time that if they came to me and I was reading a book, I could get awful bored and fall asleep. But when I got into homeschooling, those books were interesting, and I never fell asleep reading any of them, and that's why I'm reading to you. So now I'm going to homeschool you for a little while, if you don't mind, and if you don't like it, you can turn it off and go on to a previous video. Now, last time I read to you about the French Revolution, and I got a few responses in email from that. It's very interesting how people said they had never heard of it. So I'm going to reread that and then add the next part to it, and this is from the A. Becca Old World History and Geography. In 1789, the French people revolted against their government. Now, I'm not sure who instigated this or what people, because I think in every culture, in every society, in every era, there are good people that did not participate in some of these things. And we see that going on today, that they may say the Americans this and the American that, but there are a lot of Americans that don't participate in some of the things that you read about and hear in the news. So just take this with that thought in mind. In 1789, the French people revolted against their government. The French Revolution filled the land with bloodshed. The French people tried to set up a new government that did away with everything that reminded them of their old rulers and of Christianity. They made a new calendar and did away with Sundays, Easter, and Christmas. Now we see this attempt here where they are taking away the AD, which means in the year of our Lord, and BC, meaning before Christ, trying to take that away and change the meaning of it. But very clever Christians are using their initials and making it even more meaningful. The weeks would be 10 days long rather than 7. If you remember, God made the 7-day week. They said, and no longer would people figure centuries in relationship to the birth of Christ, BC. They closed the churches. Well, that's something that's gone on, and people didn't recognize it because they didn't know this little history lesson. They closed the churches and decreed that there was no life after death. All of these attempts at changing truth failed miserably, of course. Soon the French were worshiping men and reason as their gods. Before long, France came under the power of one of the history's most ruthless dictators, Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon Bonaparte was only 30 years old. Now, there were several Napoleons, you'll have to remember. He drove out the existing government and became the ruler of France. 5 years later, he crowned himself Emperor of France and set out to conquer the world. The Napoleonic Wars kept much of Europe busy trying to defend their lands against Napoleon and the French. Napoleon was finally defeated and sent to the island of Elba and then to the island of St. Helena as an exile. His followers had destroyed the government of many European countries, and it took Europe and France many years to recover from these wars. France went through more changes and bloodshed before they became a stable country again. In more recent years, France fought on the side of Great Britain in World War I and World War II. After the war, France's war hero, Charles de Gaulle, we have lots of grain trucks and hay trucks going by today, set up a democratic government called the Fifth Republic. It was fifth because 4 other attempts at republican government had failed in France. In 1981, France elected a socialist as its president. A socialist is a person who believes that a country's businesses and industries should be taken away from the individual owners and put under the control of the government. Several communists were given important jobs in this government. Now, we'll move on to other countries too who tried to do this and failed, because socialism always attempts to make people think they're going to be equal, but and better off, but the only people that really benefit from are the ones that invented it, and they don't really help the country at all. Now, also, I wanted to read a little bit more to you about, I want to tell you a little bit, since we read that part about the mother who read to me, I need to back up a little bit and remind you that these children, you have to look at them as people who are in their developing stages of life, and they don't know everything, and they can't remember everything. Sometimes you might tell a child, remember to shut that door, don't leave your shoes in the middle of the floor, and they will forget. and you become frustrated. But you are not running an army, and these people aren't fully developed. They will learn after a while. And I think that they respond better to kindness and love. And if their teacher loves them, they will love her back and want to be pleasing to their teacher, to their mother. And so this is so important. Also remember, these children have souls, and you will all become Christians maybe together, and you have to treat each other like brothers and sisters in Christ as well. And we need to be gentle with them. And also remember to be gentle with them, because they will grow up, they will be bigger than you, and they may move off, they may never speak to you again, we don't know. But just remember to have the pleasant memories, and remember what I read to you about, be patient when little hands tug at me with ceaseless small demands. Let me not in weariness, confusion, or noise be obscured from life's few fleeting joys. And it ends up saying, so that in future times when the rooms are quiet and empty, I won't be filled with any, I'll have better memories instead of bitter memories. So pray that God will use you in your home with your children to help them because you're going to end up supporting one another emotionally, and that's so important, and to be in fellowship with one another. You're raising up future Christians. Now, one thing that I like about the homeschool materials, they're from Christian schools. Actually, there's no like homeschool material. Some is homeschool material. The Christian school materials was what we began with, but we also didn't depend on it totally for curriculum. We would pull books like a poetry book out of our shelf, or maybe a book on some country of the world. And the thing that I liked is they lift up the mind, and so that's why I read it to you. It lifts you up to a possibility, to higher thinking. And sometimes people are held low by their education, by being told. I remember one school I was in when I was growing up, I was told that the people of the land that I was in were amoral. They didn't have a religion, and that was the way it worked the best for their. Can you imagine a child in a school like that thinking that there's no God and that they can't rely on God? And so that's what I liked about the Christian homeschool books, is that they lifted up the person. Now I'm going to read a little thing called the Christian Liberty Reader. What they've done is they've taken and this is book B, they've taken the McGuffey Reader, and I don't know which one this is, probably maybe 1 or 2, first or second grade, and they've taken it and kind of refined it. And today there's a picture of a mother, Victorian dress, going, it's the original, from the original book, and she's coming home from market with her little boy, and this is what they have to read. And the words are market, basket, bread, bought, meat, tea, trying, tell, and which. Now, it's just a tiny little story that this student has to read, but can you imagine being grown up with such gentle, sweet stories and words to dwell on? James has been to market with his mama. She has brought some bread, some meat, and some tea, which are in the basket on her arm. James is trying to tell his mama what he has seen in the market. Now, things haven't changed much. You look at a picture like that and you think, I'll put a picture on the post for you so you can see that more clearly. But you look at a picture like that and you can think that I've seen that today. I've seen a scene like that today. A mother holding her little boy's hand, and they're talking about what they saw at the grocery store or somewhere else that they went. But it's also trivialized today. It's so trivialized that we don't notice these things. And that's the beauty that I enjoyed about homeschooling. Having not ever attended a Christian school or a homeschool, this made these things, these little movements, these little events of the day, a mother holding the hand of her little boy, and she has a basket, and it has in it some tea, some bread, some meat, and some other things, and he's telling her what he saw. And those are precious, precious moments. The mother of Christ, says in one of the Gospels that everything that he said when he was a child, she hid in her heart. She took it to heart. And that's what we should do. If you're not keeping a little diary or something of the things that the children say, try and go do that, because what they say is really precious, like something that I told you the other day about one of the little grandchildren saying, I want to wear my person clothes today, because he wanted a button-down shirt. Just made him feel so grown up. These things are not trivialized, and there are lots of good stories in here using the original, what do they call them, lithographs? They're black and white carvings that I don't know if you've ever made anything like that. So I'm going to read the creation story on the back of it, and I'm sure this is probably for second or third graders. In 6 days God made all things. He made the sun to shine by day. He made the moon and stars to shine by night. He made the trees and the grass and the flowers. He made the beasts of the field and the fish of the sea. When he had made all things, he said they were very good. The same God made my soul and body. He gives me food to eat, water to drink, and clothes to wear. He gives me kind friends to take care of me. I would love God for all that he does for me. I'll read more to you out of that at another time. I have a few interesting things to read to you today, and this is another homeschool book from a Becca. Now, we did not order a complete homeschool curriculum because I believed in the eclectic approach, where you get things from all kinds of life and things that you might already have. And curriculum isn't necessarily the way to education, and also that you have to make them interested in it. And it can't be a forced learning, because how would you like to be forced to learn something? We just learn better when we're interested in it, don't we? And when we're enthusiastic about it. So today I'm going to read you the story of a kite. And we talked about kites before in that last video where I talked about the poem Try, Try Again. And this is called Paths to Follow. And what it is a collection of stories from all different kinds of adventures and things. And only thing that I have to say is to be careful, because so many stories like this are so fantastic that you might forget that your accomplishments at home and with your children and the things that they do are important too. And this is about a man who grew up flying kites, and he wanted to fly a kite over the Niagara Falls. And what I wanted to say about that is, why not gather your children together at night or in the morning and say, all right, here's how much we've learned today. Here's how you have improved. Here's how you have grown. And here's what you have learned to do. And also talk about their character and their nature. You know, you're more good-natured, and you're a very thoughtful person. You seem to be observing everything. And some children don't do very much, but they watch, and they watch other people, and then they'll develop later on. And I think it's really good to gather them around and say, this is where we're going today, this is what we're doing today, and this is how it can benefit you. And because I think we miss a lot. We say, well, we'll just do our homeschool and then we'll go somewhere. We miss a lot when we say, oh, we'll just do this lesson and this lesson and that lesson, and then we'll all go somewhere. Everything you do has to be part of raising them, has to be part of building their character, has to be part of building a bonding between you and them. And I got to where I couldn't even separate schooling from life. In fact, that's why I talk to you, because it's all the same to me. And even when you're trying to help a child make a bed, you're talking and you're teaching, and there's so many stories that you can use with what you're doing, or just enjoying it. So this man wanted to fly a kite, and I will just read you. It's a long story, so I'm just going to read you the ending of it, and it's called Try, Try Again. Homeman worked hard to fly his kite across the Niagara River and make a link between Canada and the United States. He wanted his kite string to be the first step towards the bridge that would stretch across the gap between the two countries. Homan would let nothing stop him from getting Union across. Even when the fierce wind was tangling kite lines and blowing in the wrong direction, Homan did not give up. He kept on trying until he landed Union on the other side. On your paper, write what Homan did when each of these troubles arose. Number 1, the wind blew in the wrong direction and on his side of the river. Number 2, just as his kite landed across the river, the string caught on a huge ice cake and snapped. Number 3, a few days later, the river became icy and dangerous to cross. So I think that this is so important about how he tried again and again and again. Here's the introduction to the story. Goodness. One day over 100 years ago, a boy named Homan Walsh sat staring down at a swift and dangerous river roaring along below. As he watched the rushing waters of the Niagara River come crashing down over the Niagara Falls, he was trying to picture a bridge. It was stretched from the cliffs of the United States, where he was sitting, to the high stone walls of Canada across the river. Homan's mind was filled with wonder. Could a bridge like that really be built? It seemed impossible, and yet just an hour before he had heard a man say that the plans for starting such a bridge had already been made. What they needed first, the man had said, was to get a string across from one side of the river to the other. It seemed that the best way this could be done was by flying a kite across. So a $5 prize was going to be given to the first person to succeed in doing this. $5? My, what a wonderful prize! Holman stood up and stared across the steep cliffs on the Canada side of the river. How wonderful it would be if the string of his kite could be the first to bridge the great wide gap. I'm sure I can do it, he cried out suddenly and jumping to his feet. And as Holman spoke, the river seemed to catch his words and roar back, "Do it, do it." So Homan Walsh ran home to build a new kite. Now the story goes on to tell how many times he tried to do this. The roaring waters were swift and dangerous, but the rivermen knew that the Niagara well. It did not take long for one of the boats to carry Homan over to Canada. Once there, he climbed up another steep trail and walked along the cliff for 2 miles. He stopped at Johnny Wells' house and asked his friend to come along. Then they hurried on together to the spot where Homan planned to send his kite across the river. When they arrived, they found that several other boys were there already and had the same idea. So, there are so many stories in these kind of books. These are readers. And there's so many stories in them that are for boys that can be so inspiring. And there's another one in here that I would really like to read sometime when I have a little longer, about the Pony Express. And the Pony Express was the first post office, and as you know, a post was a post that was in the ground. It was connected to a fence usually. And when people wanted a message sent to someone or some kind of announcement, they would put a piece of paper or something, piece of wood with a nail onto that post, and that meant it was posted. So when we had the Pony Express in the post office, it meant that messages now could be sent through this Pony Express, where they would collect the mail and take it in relays form. Stop at a certain place, transfer the mail, and then another horse would take it, and a rider would take it. So I want to read to you about that because it was so interesting. Now I want to talk a little bit about self-improvement and people, and make sure that I cover that. There are things that people take away from us that we shouldn't allow, and it is real easy for it to happen. Now I remember my mother-in-law. She grew up before the washing machine, and everything was washed by hand. But of course she was in her 60s, in the 1960s, and she had a washing machine. But for some reason, she took her own clothes and washed them by hand. She would have dresses and things that she didn't really want to put in the washing machine. And people who visited her would tell her, "You don't have to do that. You can put it on delicate and run it." And she said, "No." She said, "I'm used to doing this and it relaxes me." So she would get her pan of water out and she'd wash her stuff and feel her hands squishing the water and the garments. And squeeze out the water, roll the item up in a towel, and squeeze that a little bit, and then hang them both outside. And people wondered, why does she do that? First of all, it was something she was used to doing, and she didn't want to have it taken away from her. It was her thought time, her thinking time. It was her time. You know, I've often told you that hands engage the mind, and that's why ladies used to like some kind of handwork, and whether it was needlework or painting or something else. And this was what she did because it made her stop. It made her think. But I can't tell you how many times I heard somebody say, why does your mother-in-law hand wash her clothes? But those are things that people try to take away from us, such as, you know, your tea time or just habits that you've had, and that as the world changes, it yanks them all away from you. And so that is one thing I think that is kind of stunning for some people, to have things taken away from them. And as I told you, the world is a narcissist, and the minute it finds out that you are enjoying something, that you prosper by something, or that you improve emotionally or mentally, they'll figure out a way to yank it away from you. And I remember someone I knew that was just used to this certain type of tea that she made and couldn't find it anywhere because there were 2 countries that had had a war and they couldn't get the tea through anymore, and she had to adjust to something else. And these are things that can really upset people. And so today I want to talk a little bit about the kind of people that we are around sometimes, maybe have to be around, which want to tell you how bad you are and how good they are. And what I have found out from several people that have been through this is that it's best to not answer when someone says something rude, because if you answer and you defend yourself, then they've got something else to argue about. They can argue with your defense. So several people have told me when they get one of these messages or texts, or I don't know, letters, or even face-to-face, someone saying something really rude to them, they just walk past. They don't even answer, because that just engages them. That gives them more to talk about and more to argue back with. And they have all the answers. It's just amazing. They have all the answers. I was picking out fruit a few years ago, and I was just going to put a few things in my grocery cart, and I was picking out fruit, and there was a certain type that I liked. And somebody walked by and said to me, and it was a man, and he said to me, why do you want to get that when this one was so much cheaper? And I said, well, we prefer this kind, and we don't eat many of them anyway. And he said, well, it doesn't make much sense. And then he started to tell me some other things, and the more I tried to defend myself, the more animated he got. And I learned from that, just say, because that's the way I like it, and walk away. And if someone is being very critical and accusing, you can say, I'm happy, and I hope that you'll be happy too. And there are many things that we have to watch out for. And one thing I think is really important is to teach children when to walk away, when not to answer, and when to answer. Now I do have a refinement assignment for you. Do you remember when I told you to set one place setting and maybe take a picture of it, or just record how you felt about it, or just do one pretty thing for yourself? Well, I'd like you to today to find something for self-improvement and for home improvement that you can do yourself. And for me, it has been to find some hairstyling instructional videos, because a lot of people can't get to the hairdresser, or even if the hairdressers open up, found that they really like to stay home. And you can find some things like that to help you with your self-improvement. And then there is also the intellectual self-improvement. So today I'm going to read a book to you today. Now I always miss Black History Month. I'm always late for every holiday, and I don't think of it till it's well past. But I've had this book for some time, and I've been going through my books and found this one, and it is well marked, and the children all underlined stuff in it. I wish I could read it all. And it's about George Booker T. Washington, called Up from Slavery, and he lived from 1856 to 1915. Now, there are some really interesting things in here that all of us need to learn. He was the one that helped create Tuskegee Institute. And recently, I think in one of President Trump's State of the Union addresses, he had some Tuskegee Institute airplane pilots, flyers that attended, which he brought attention to. And so I wanted to tell you why he created Tuskegee Institute. First of all, because he knew that the slaves would be freed and that they would have to have a place to go to help them understand how to create careers for themselves, because they could no longer depend on the care of the plantations and of the people who they worked for. They could no longer depend on those. A lot of that was going to be gone. And so, but he said he learned one of his first jobs. Of course, I couldn't find it anywhere here. The first job that he had, he wanted an education, so he offered a teacher who was teaching children in a one-room classroom, I will take care of the fire, I'll build the fire, I'll clean out the fireplace, and I will sweep floors, and if you will teach me something. And I don't know quite what the subjects were that they taught in that school, but he said that he watched her quite a bit, and that she, when the children were kind of doing their lessons, she would clean the chalkboard. She would, pound out the erasers, pound the chalk out of the erasers. She'd go outside, and then she also swept. She was never sitting there idle for a minute. And he learned something very important. He said was that when you have an important work to do, you never get too good to clean up or to do the things that other people are commonly hired for. And he said that was one of the basis of his education and of his skills. So I wanted to read a few things that he wrote in here and that other people wrote about him. And about how he learned from other people. And how he started out. But I'm kind of going towards the end of the book because I think this is really important. There are 2 pages that I marked here. He said, I had always sympathized with the children of Israel in their task of making bricks without straw, but ours was the task of making bricks with no money and no experience. In the first place, the work was hard and dirty, and it was difficult to get the students to help. When it came to brickmaking, their distaste for manual labor in connection with the book education became especially manifest. It was not a pleasant task for one to stand in the mud pit for hours with the mud up to their knees. More than one man became disgusted and left the school. He's talking about the Tuskegee Institute, where he was hiring people or having people volunteer to teach various skills that they knew to help other people develop skills to use in this new era that they were going to be in. We tried several locations before we opened up a pit that furnished brick clay. I had always supposed that brickmaking was very simple, but I soon found out by bitter experience that it required special skill and knowledge, particularly in the burning of the bricks. After a good deal of effort, we molded about 25,000 bricks and put them into a kiln to be burned. This kiln turned out to be a failure because it was not properly constructed or properly burned. We began at once, however, on a second kiln. This, for some reason, also proved a failure. The failure of this kiln made it still more difficult to get the students to take any part in the work. Yeah, success is so important for enthusiasm, and I always remember that Christ told the disciples, if they won't listen to you in a city, shake the dust off your feet and leave, because he knew the importance of success. If you get too many failures or you get turned down too many times, you just quit. And so he knew that it wasn't very good for their enthusiasm and their confidence to be in a city where they were not received, so he told them to go where they would be received. But anyway, it looks like he tried a number of times to make these bricks. Several of the teachers, however, who had been trained in the industries at Hampton, volunteered their services, and in some way we succeeded in getting a third kiln ready for burning. The burning of a kiln required about a week. Toward the latter part of the week, when it seemed as if we were going to have a good many thousand bricks in a few hours, in the middle of the night the kiln fell, and the third time we failed. The failure of this last kiln left me without a single dollar with which to make another experiment. Most of the teachers advised the abandoning of the effort to make bricks. In the midst of my troubles, I thought of a watch which had come into my possession years before. I took this watch to the city of Montgomery, which was not far distant, and placed it in a pawn shop. I secured cash upon it to the amount of $15, with which to renew the brick-making experiment. I returned to Tuskegee and, with the help of the $15, rallied out rather demoralized and discouraged forces and began a fourth attempt to make bricks. This time I am glad to say we were successful. Before I got hold of any money, the time limit on my watch had expired, and I have never seen it since, but I have never regretted the loss of it. Brick-making has now become such an important industry at the school that last season our students manufactured 1,200,000 of first-class bricks of a quality suitable to be sold at any market. Aside from this, scores of young men have mastered the brick-making trade, both the making of bricks by hand and by machinery, and are now engaged in this industry in many parts of the South. That's true in the South, a lot of brick homes in the South. The making of these bricks taught me an important lesson in regard to the relations of the two races of the South. Many white people who had no contact with the school, and perhaps no sympathy with it, came to us to buy bricks because they found out ours were good bricks. They discovered that we were supplying a real want in the community. The making of these bricks caused many of the white residents of the neighborhood to begin to feel that the education of the Negro was not making him worthless, but that in educating our students we were adding something to the wealth and comfort of the community. As the people of the neighborhood came to us to buy bricks, we got acquainted with them. They traded with us, and we traded with them. Our business interests became intermingled. We had something which they wanted. They had something which we wanted. This, in large measure, helped to lay the foundation for the pleasant relationships that have continued to exist between us and the white people in that section, which we now extend throughout the South. Now, ladies, this is where you're going to get the truth from someone who lived in the era and wrote about it. And the political spin that people give to someone like Booker T. Washington and Tuskegee Institute is not always what reality was. Wherever one of our brickmakers has gone in the South, we find that he has something to contribute to the well-being of the community into which he has gone, something that has made the community feel that, in a degree, it is indebted to him and perhaps to a certain extent dependent upon him. In this way, pleasant relationships between the races have been stimulated. My experience is that there is something in human nature which always makes an individual recognize and reward merit, no matter under what color of skin merit is found. I have found, too, that is the visible, the tangible, that goes a long ways in softening prejudices. The actual sight of a first-class house that a Negro has built is 10 times more potent than the pages of discussion about a house that he ought to build or perhaps could build. This just fascinated me because of the word merit, and I thought, my goodness, you could start with nothing, and merit. A merit means what you have proven yourself. That's what it is, to prove yourself. The individual who can do something that the world wants done will, in the end, make his way regardless of his race or station in life. Okay, so here is a tribute by someone named Lewis R. Harlan, Booker T. Washington in biographical perspective. And it says here, part of his obituary was, improve yourself slowly through education and property, through severe and constant struggle rather than artificial forcing. a few years after uh, he had written his bestseller, Up from Slavery. And I'm not sure what year he wrote this in. Of course, his dates were, and by the way, we had this book in the 1950s in schools. Everybody had to read them. Everybody had to know about how our culture was formed and the people that contributed to making America America and making it great. 1856 to 1915. So it was published somewhere between then. And so I wanted to read that to you because of the positivity of it and how he kept throughout the book. It's a pretty thick book, very small print, and lots of footnotes and bibliography. It's quite historical. So I'll read some more about what he said. I am often asked how, in the midst of so much work, a large part of which is before the public, I can find any time for rest or recreation, and what kind of recreation or sports I am fond of. This is rather a difficult question for me to answer. I have a strong feeling that every individual owes it to himself and to the cause for which he is serving to keep a vigorous, healthy body with the nerves steady and strong, prepared for great efforts and prepared for disappointments and trying positions. As far as I can, I make it a rule to plan for each day's work, not merely to go through with the same routine of daily duties, but to get rid of the routine work as early in the day as possible, and then to enter upon some new or advanced work. You know, this is the way the women were in the 1950s. They would say, let's get our work done and then we can go do this, or let's get our work done and then we can plan a picnic. Let's get our work done and then we can go to town. That's what they did. They got the routine stuff out of the way. Now, for me, sometimes the routine stuff is important for me to have and stretch out through the day. It balances me, like, all the things that I have to do are part. I don't want to rush through anything. And then he says, I make it a rule to clear my desk every day before new or advanced work. I make it a rule to clear my desk every day before leaving my office of all correspondence and memoranda, so that on the morrow I can begin a new day of work. Well, that's important too, I think, even as homemakers. It would be nice to get up in the morning and not have any of yesterday's work uncompleted. Now, that's an exception for people like me who are sewists, and I still have things sitting on my sewing machine that I couldn't finish yesterday. I make it a rule never to let my work drive me, but to so master it and keep it in such complete control, to keep so far ahead of it that I will be the master instead of the servant. Wouldn't that be nice to be 3 or 4 days ahead of yourself? Like if you've got some event coming up, to be ready for it today. Wouldn't that be nice? There is a physical and mental and spiritual enjoyment that comes from a consciousness of being the absolute master of one's work in all its details. That is very satisfactory and inspiring. Imagine this being read in the public schools. What an inspiration. What a glorious information. And to ask the student, what does it mean to master your work instead of letting it master you? Let's discuss that. I would stop here. Then I would talk to my children. Okay, what do you think that means? How would you master such and such that you're trying to do? How would you be a master of it instead of it beating you down and making you feel like you're under severe labor? And so, yes, this ought to be read in all the public schools. My experience teaches me that if one learns to follow this plan, he gets a freshness of body and vigor of mind out of work that goes a long way towards keeping him strong and healthy. I believe that when one can grow to the point where he loves his work, this gives him a kind of strength that is more valuable. And that's why I say in the home, instead of dreading your work, learn to love it. Learn to love every moment of it. Add a finishing touch to everything and enjoy it. When I begin my work in the morning, I expect to have a successful and pleasant day of it. But at the same time, I do prepare myself for unpleasant and unexpected hard places. That's the same with a woman at home. You know there's going to be interruptions. It's like some people say, expect the best, but plan for the worst. So we know that we're going to be interrupted. We know that we might not be able to do it. And I'm kind of thinking, okay, if I get interrupted now, will I be able to put this in the fridge and continue it later? I prepare myself to hear that one of our school buildings is on fire or has burned, or that some disagreeable accident has occurred, or that someone has abused me in a public address or printed an article against me for something I have done or admitted to do, or for something that he had heard that I had said, probably something that I had never thought of saying. In 19 years of continuous work, I have taken but one vacation. That was 2 years ago, when some of my friends put the money into my hands and forced Mrs. Washington and myself to spend 3 months in Europe. I have said that I believe it is the duty of every one to keep his body in good condition. I try to look after the little ills with the idea that if I take care of the little ills, the big ones will not come. That's why one of the reasons that, back in the olden days, if we had a little trifling headache or if we had a sniffle, we would immediately try to do something about it. In fact, even going to lay down for a while, taking a nap, taking a hot bath with some hot lemon drink, and sometimes that would just knock it out. But we took care of it when it first came, and the same thing with a headache. We'd stop and rest a little bit. And then I heard later on, back towards the 60s, there would be articles in magazines and papers and saying that women shouldn't stay home for a trifling headache, and they haven't been as healthy ever since, I don't think. The ability to sleep well at any time and in any place I find of a great advantage. I have so trained myself that I can lie down for a nap of 15 or 20 minutes and get up refreshed in body and mind. I have said that I make it a rule to finish up each day's work before leaving it. There is perhaps one exception to this. When I have unusually difficult questions to decide, one that appeals strongly to the emotions, I find it a safe rule to sleep overnight over it, or to wait until I've had the opportunity to talk it over with my wife and my friends. So he wouldn't finish a project if he had some questions about it and he needed to talk it over with someone. As to my reading, the most time I get for solid reading is when I remember, Molly, I don't have much use for steady reading. As for solid reading, when I am on the cars, cars meant the train. Newspapers are to me a constant source of delight and recreation. The only trouble is that I find too many flaws in them. Fiction I care little for. Frequently I have almost to force myself to read a novel that is on everybody else's lips. The kind of reading that I have the greatest fondness is biography. I like to be sure I am reading about a real man or a real thing. I think I do not go too far when I say that I have read nearly every book and magazine article that has been written about Abraham Lincoln. In literature, he is my patron saint. Out of the 12 months in a year, I suppose that, on an average, I spend 6 months away from Tuskegee, while my being absent from the school is so much unquestionably has its disadvantages. There are at some time some compensations. The change of work brings a certain kind of rest. I enjoy a ride of long distance on the cars, and I am permitted to ride where I can be comfortable. I get rest on the cars, except when the inevitable individual who seems to be on every train approaches me with the now familiar phrase, "Aren't you Booker Washington? I want to introduce myself to you." Absence from the school enables me to lose sight of the unimportant details of the work, and I study it in broader and more comprehensive manner than I could do on the grounds. This absence also brings me into contact with the best work being done in educational lines, and into contact with the best educators of the land. But after all this is said, the time that I get the most solid rest and recreation is when I can be at Tuskegee, and after our evening meal is over can sit down, as is our custom, with my wife and Portia and Baker and Davidson, my 3 children, and read a story, or each take turns of telling a story. To me there is nothing on earth equal to that, although what has nearly equal to it is to go with them for an hour or more, like we do on Sunday afternoons, into the woods, where we can live for a little while in the heart of nature, where no one can disturb or vex us, surrounded by pure air, the trees, the shrubbery, the flowers, and the sweet fragrance that springs into 100 plants, enjoying the chirp of the crickets and the song of the birds. This is solid rest. Enjoy time with children and nature. That's what the little note here says. My garden also, what little time I can be at Tuskegee, is another source of rest and enjoyment. Somehow I like, as often as possible, to touch nature, not something that is artificial or imitation, but the real thing. When I can, leave my office in time so that I can spend 30 or 40 minutes in spading the ground, in planting seeds, in digging about the plants. I feel that I am coming into contact with something that is giving me strength for the many duties and hard places that await me out in the big world. I pity the man or woman who has never learned to enjoy nature and get strength and inspiration from it. Aside from the large number of fowls and animals kept by the school, I keep individually a number of fowls in the best grades, and in raising these animals I take a great deal of pleasure. Games I care little for. I have never seen a game of football. In cards I do not know one card from another. A game of old-fashioned marbles with my two boys once in a while is all I care for in this direction. I suppose I would care for games now if I had any time in my youth to give them, but that was not possible. I particularly don't like games because they waste so much time. I'd rather make something. That's a game to me. So ladies, I hope that this inspires you. You know what? The stuff that I was reading, and like he would be asked questions. What do you do with your time? How do you take care of your health and stuff? You can write stuff like this. You can write this down for your children. You can write it in your own little diary or make a little book and write all these things that he observed. Why did he like his garden? Why did he what did he say? Or what do you believe inspires you the most? That kind of thing. I love this story and I love this book, and we read these things. We also read George Washington Carver. Booker T. Washington hired George Washington Carver to create the grounds and the landscape of the Tuskegee Institute, and they were good friends. And he couldn't pay him, but they worked out a deal of some kind of trade of skills with each other. And so, just really, this is called Up from Slavery by Booker T. Washington, and it's from W. W. Norton, but you can find other publishers and other things. I love this book, and I just love what it has, the teaching that it has. That's American, that's Western, that's civilization, and that's making progress, and that's what I love. I want to. That's part of my self-improvement is Booker T. Washington. I just love it. And of course, there were many other people of his era that were just like that. I have a book about J.C. Penney, who started J.C. Penney, what an interesting person he was. I have other books about people from the olden days, and there were many people like that. Not every one of them wrote a book, but I think that that's just so inspiring. And so, ladies, I hope you have a wonderful day, and that you were inspired by this, and that you got a great deal out of it, and that you can apply some of it to the home. So I want to thank you for coming, and I'll see you next time. Bye.